Okay, we're going today the Torah U'Madda. Is that what you call it? Do they know what they call it? What is today? What? Okay, so I'll go into the history of that. So this is the meeting of the Jewish world, which is with so-called secular knowledge. Okay, and secular knowledge is represented in the Western tradition as being Greek knowledge. That is, the Greeks were the first philosophers, the first scientists, and so on and so forth. It may be a myth, but that's what we're calling it by the name that we're calling it. So, generally speaking, people think that the meeting of Torah with U'Madda. How do you translate U'Madda? Science, right? Yeah, wrong, but okay. That's what I'm going to make it a point. You know, you watch out when people or teachers. I always found when teachers ask questions like that, always to say the thing that nobody would expect. And people, there was few teachers who thought I was a wise guy because I ruined it for them, right? Or some people thought I was smart, but whatever. Probably both true at that point. But actually today, from what I see on the schedule, there are going to be two in that which is not in the world of Madda, science. I walked around I was at the University on Har Tzofim, and they have signs, that Mada'ei hazeh, Mada'ei, this science, that science, right? So it's the sociology also had to get into it. So Mada'ei hachevra, and so on and so forth, as if this were thank you.
Originals.
Okay.
Double-sided.
Originals and double-sided, everything. As if that was right, but there was no Mada'ei hasifrut. There was no literary or Mada'ei ha'omanut or artistic. So today, from what I understand, I'm speaking about poetry, Shakespeare, and somebody is speaking about art. Nobody is speaking about other forms of humanistic presentations, such as music or dance, and so on and so forth. But that's what it is. So we're talking about poetry. Actually, Shakespeare, of course, is a poet, and his plays are full of poetry. But we're going to talk about, for a while, we're going to talk about one of his plays. So, but just before I begin, just to get a sense of where you guys are at, okay? So, just by a show of hands, right? And there's no right or wrong answer. How many of you guys could say you regularly, at least like 2 or 3 times a week, sit down and read poetry? Okay, that's what I expected. When you went to school, you remember school? Okay? And you had to take a class in English, let's say, right? You did it in America and England, I know. You take classes in English? Yes? Yes. So how many of you were made to stand in front of the class and actually read a poem? Wow, more than I expected, right? Okay. Okay, how many of you guys have read you all read a play by Shakespeare, right? One play, right? Caesar, Macbeth, right? Yes? Okay, so how many of you guys actually on your own have read any plays by William Shakespeare? Whoa, not bad. Rabbi Berman, you don't count. That's it, right? Okay. And how many of you, finally, the last question, how many of you have gone to the theater on your own, not trying to impress Hennish Prince, right? How many of you gone to the theater and watched a play? Wow, terrific, right, terrific. Okay. Those who come from England, of course, you know, if you come from England, you know you can go to the Globe, and you have the genuine Shakespearean experience and genuine Jewish experience. Because instead of sitting in a seat and paying 20 to 50, 75 pounds to watch the play, you can stand, just like in the good old days. You stand in front of the stage, and you have to stand for a couple hours, but it only costs £5, right? So you have the last time I was there, so it was The Merchant of Venice. See this? So I was standing in the audience, everybody looking down at me and watching. At least that's what I felt like. Like I wanted, feeling they're saying his nose isn't that long. But Okay. Now the truth of the matter is, of course, and this is the real reason that I'm talking about this whole thing today about poetry. The truth is, of course, that all of you guys, all of you, and I'm not choshed in anybody, choshed b'ksherim, all of you have said today, have recited today already, at least, and certainly by the end of the day, at least 20 poems. Thank you. Apropos of gratitude. Now, what could I mean by that? What do you mean? Yes. What? Tehillim. Right? Tehillim they're all poems. So you said your, quote, regular Psuki de Zimra. You said Hallel, full Hallel. Ashrei twice, right? And haven't you actually been during Chanuka, been singing a poem every night? No, Ma'oz Tzur Yeshua, say, right? Is there anybody here who can translate the whole and give me the whole reference? Okay, you don't have to put up your hand because I won't call on you anyway, but, right? It's actually a poem full of poetic beauty. It's not just, roses are red, violets are blue, blah, 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 too, right? That kind of thing. It's really a poem. Okay. So, you're actually doing it. You're actually involved in poetry if you are living a full Jewish life. It's the way we talk to God. Okay? Now, have any of you been Ma'avir Sedra this week? Or started? Yeah, okay. So that means you are reading Torah. What is the name that Torah gives itself? Kitvu lachem et what? Hashira hazot. What does the word shira mean? Poetry, of course. Now, many people connect the word shir with, and not incorrectly, with melody, with song. That's because all poetry, and I hope you'll get an experience of it today, when you read poetry, you have to read it with feeling, So, in a sense, poems have to be acted out. All right. Let me go back to how I want to give you a background, a personal background about how I came to that and why I'm talking about this today and why I'm talking about it all too often. Okay? I went to a high school for 3 years called the JEC, a wonderful high school, the only yeshiva high school in New Jersey then. Okay? And it had 25 students. That's all. So but the person who taught us English was committed to doing only one thing for 3 years, learning how to, what they call diagram sentences. parse sentences, and then you had a line and direct object and things hanging below line. Do you guys know what that is? Okay, blessed be you that you never went through that. It's idiotic. Okay, then I spent a year in TELS, where the secular department was not strong, and the main thing of the secular department would be that they didn't teach you anything, so you wouldn't want to go to university, right? And then I came to YU, and we call this Torah U'Madda. The Torah, the name that this day has, comes from the emblem. You have your cell phone? Okay. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay. You see this thing on the back? Okay. It's got the logo of YU. They give it out to try to get people to go to YU, justifiably so. And you get these goodies for nothing. Have they come and distributed goodies to you? Sure. Sure. Do you have these things? So it says Torah U'Madda. That's the emblem. My wife didn't. My wife would have gone to Yeshiva, but college, Stern College, but they didn't give them out in those days, so she went to Barnard. What can you do? Okay. So, and so we were, as when I was your age, and I was in Yeshiva College, so that's all they talked about at the time. Torah U'Madda. Torah U'Madda is somehow the synthesis of both. And we talked about it a lot, but it was never really articulated. There were models of Torah U'Madda. There was the Rav and there was Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. But in truth, they were far, far beyond us. It was traditional on Chanuka in YU. It was traditional that the professor of Greek, Dr. Louis Feldman, Allah Shalom, would come to the yeshiva for Shabbos Chanukah, and the theme of he was professor of classics, the theme of his presentations on Shabbos were always the Greek side of Chanukah. So he was a very interesting guy, right? But the idea that there is some way to synthesize it, synthesize that, that's what Torah U'Madda is about. And that's the Torah U. So, one of the problems, and this was articulated very frequently in the 1960s when I was growing up and going to school, TELS and so on and so forth, was that the great threat to acceptance of the truth of Torah was science. Okay? That was, as it seems to me in retrospect, a terrible blunder on the part of people who didn't understand science. Maybe scientists, but not science. Science is the wonder. The more scientifically we know, it's the wonder of God's creation. It's, if you know science, to the degree that you know science, to the degree that you know astronomy, Tehillim takes on far vaster, to the degree that you know cellular biology, does the wonder of the human condition, the physical condition, all of creation, right? So the real issue, the real problem of Madda, I would say, is not within science, but within the so-called liberal arts. Emphasize the word of arts. Liberal arts are concerned with things that are not science. And one of the things that they're concerned with, of course, whether you're talking about art, see this art on the wall, wonderful art, right? Be nicer if we had a Rembrandt or, right? But okay, right? It is wonderful. It isn't wonderful. Music, right? How many of you guys go to listen to opera? No? Yes? Okay. And Classical music? Classical music does not mean Dylan. Okay, so, right, good, right? But not too many. But the reason if you meet this young lady named Henne Sprinzer and she says, oh, Mozart. So you say, yeah, and then you run home to find out who that is, what it is, okay? But and then you come back next time, you say, yes, I listened to, okay, I'll use my Horowitz's Mozart Piano Concerto number 23. I listened to Horowitz play it, and Henne Sprinzer says, wow, this guy is somebody, wow. It's beautiful! Right. So the problem is, and now this is a problem, you can be inveigled, you can be seduced by great literature, great art, great music. This is really one of the central themes of Kierkegaard's Either Or, but that's just a reference. One day you'll read it in university. There is a poem. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to be reading poems. Since Shakespeare was an Englishman, I'm going to be dotting it with poems from other Englishmen, right? So the first poem, I just wanted the end of a poem. It's a long poem. The end of the last is John Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn. This beautiful urn. You go to the British Museum, when you go to England, not only will you see a Shakespeare play, but you'll stay at one of the English guys' houses, so you don't have to pay exorbitant fees. And the refrigerators in English homes are a little smaller than in American homes, but be it as it may. Okay? You'll go to the Globe, and you'll also go to the British Museum, and you'll see that tremendous collection of Grecian urns, and you will see things like this that Keats is writing the poem about, right? Remember, the British Museum is free, okay? So it's another experience, right? So just the last few lines of this poem, which have become famous in there, it's so wonderful. Oh, Attic shape, fair attitude with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. They're dancing around, right? Am I doing it right? They're getting the dance where you can't see the way my feet are kicking up, right? Maybe we should dance around together. Oh, okay. With forest branches in the trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity. Cold pastoral, when old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth. Truth, beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. Whoa! Is this Jewishly acceptable? Beauty is truth? Sheker hached. Sheker hached v'hevla yofi isha yirat Hashem. The Vilna Gaon says, he says, there is nothing wrong with beautiful women, or wanting to marry a beautiful woman. But that's only when Yirat Hashem, when she has Yirat Hashem. The Gaon says that, right? Beauty by itself is not truth. On the other hand, truth is beautiful. Anybody who's experienced, certainly in the sciences, when you've experienced truth in science, you say, wow, that's beautiful. In Hebrew, you know the word for truth? Emet. There is another word for truth in Hebrew. Anybody know? Okay, I'll tell you. Koshet. You say that word in Aramaic every week. Oraita kshot, right? The Torah is true. The word kuf shin tet in Hebrew means truth, but it also kishut kuf shin tet, and I saw this idea in the Sfas Emes a couple weeks ago, is the word for beauty. ornament, jewelry, right? So we can understand, in this line, I can understand it even though I don't really know it. I can understand how Leibniz said, when God sings to himself, he sings algebra. But beauty is truth? No. So the Torah, let me just give you, and then we'll move on to Shakespeare. The Torah begins with poetry. It is a Sefer Shira. Okay, if it begins with, right, I want you to listen to the poetry. Sound, it's all in the sound. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. You hear the poetry? What is the poetic form in that? Doesn't rhyme, right? So it's alliteration. It's four times do you have the plosive, right? Which is very nice in the plosive statement about all of creation. What do we say in English? The plosive p sound, the Big Bang Theory, right? So creation from nothing needs a plosive. If the Torah had begun with Aleph, right? Anochi Hashem L'Kacha begins with Aleph. That's a different story, right? But the poetry is in the alliteration. Something is happening, and then Aretz, second pasuk, ve'aretz hayta tohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tahom. You hear that there is something. Have you ever been in a place of emptiness? It's an oh sound. V'ruach Elokim. No, v'ruach Elohim. It's translated. You can translate it as the Spirit of God, right? But the son of the Vilna Gaon translates that the word Elohim means power here, and a powerful wind. Those who know Big Bang Theory will appreciate that. The powerful wind, right? Mirachefet al pnei hamayim. So you hear ruach, reish ches, mirachefet. The ruach is ruaching. So it's poetry. It's shira. So today, okay, the mission of today is Lear, okay? A big question about Lear is whether Lear is a tragedy or not. What would you think? It is a tragedy. It is in the tragedies of Shakespeare. What are the other tragedies? Can you name me some tragedies? What I don't hear? Macbeth. Okay. The Richards. The Richards, the kings of England, they're all tragedies. Right? Royal family. Right? So, and I would like to I have way too much material, but I'd like to get to some practical suggestions how to wake up every morning. Now, I was fortunate in my education that when I went to Yeshivat College, you had to take 2 years of English, and the second year was literature. And I had a professor, Talbus, who not only taught me, I think, how to write a little bit, but also how to read. And the reason he taught me how to read was because in the other teachers' classes, there were only 6 of us in Talbus's class. Nobody wanted to take his class because he knew how to give out C's. He knew how to give round marks. You know? So I was with Rabbi Tabori's father in the class. He called us the Bobsey twins, and he didn't take attendance. But nonetheless, we generally came, although sometimes we skipped, that's true. But the final tests were material. In other words, this thing was what you did on all the other English tests, literature tests. That's called shoveling. You had to memorize lines that you had learned, and you had to just write them on the test. And then the professor said, well, he learned something. We were given, Taubes was the only one who did this, we were given material that we had never seen before, and we had to identify the author. And you could be 100% wrong about the author and still get 100 if your argument was good. And you could be right about who the author was, and you could fail because you couldn't explain why he was the author, right? So that taught me something about reading. And the second was, of course, the Rav, who did not teach poetry, even though in one famous moment, I was not in the shir at the time, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein was there in the shir, and he asked the Rav Akasha on the Gemara, or the Tosfos, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you what it was on. He asked him Akasha in the Gemara shir based on something in Spencer's Fairy Queen. Okay. I see you're all dumbstruck by that. Wow, So that's a famous story. But the Rav would appreciate that, because the Rav taught people. What he taught was how to read a text very carefully. It has to be in the words, and to the degree that something has to be in the words, most significantly, you're certainly talking about poetry. There can't be extra words in poetry, just like there can't be extra words in the Torah. Okay, so I came to talking about poetry. It happened when I was in Yeshivat Niftar, a good number of years ago, when a student of mine had given a Dvar Torah on Shabbos at the meal, and I said to him afterwards, I said, look, that was very nice what you said. It was midrashic. I never knew you had a midrashic spirit. So he said to me, Rabbi, but what's midrash? So, okay, yeah. So I said, well, why don't we learn a little bit together? So every day once a week, I learned the midrash Yalkut Shimoni on the Akedah with him. On the Akedah. And at one point, as we were learning the Medrash, I said, you know what the Medrash is commenting on here? The Medrash is commenting on Avram and Yitzchak are going somewhere. Neither one knows where they're going. One of them knows why they're going. What are they talking about? We don't know. They don't say anything. 3 days, a father and son going on a journey. What are they talking about? And the Medrash is commenting here on the silence of the text. The silence of the text. And he looked at me like he didn't know correctly what I was talking about. So I said, listen, it's like when you were in high school and you had to read a poem in front of the class, and you had to know how to read the words with feeling and how to read the silence with feeling. And he looked at me and he said, Rabbi, I went to MTA. MTA is Manhattan Talmudical Academy. We never read poetry aloud in class. So I said, So I gave him a poem to read. And the poem that I gave him to read is actually relevant, is to this. It's a poem by Dylan Thomas, a Welshman, okay, who was able to knew how to read poetry very well. Most of the time he was drunk. Okay? Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle, poem number 2. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words have forked no lightning. They do not go gentle into that good night. And I'm coming to the last stanza. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. That's the poem I gave. And I asked him, and I said, I want you to read it to me. So he read it to me. And more or less this is the way he read it. Do not go gentle unto that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men. That's the way he read it. I said, no, what? Did you make a mistake? No, you didn't make a mistake. I said, I had a recording of Dylan Thomas reading it, as only Dylan Thomas can read it. I didn't drink at all before I started giving this lecture, right? So, and I said, that's the way you have to read it, right? So, because, now, the question is not whether this is a beautiful poem. Is it true? If I were to put this to the test of truth, would you say it's true? How many people think that this is what you should tell a dying person? Rage at the... just, what do you think? What would you say is true? You have to make a split decision. Gentlemen. Yeah? What?
What's true is the author's feeling.
What's true is the author's feeling, right? Okay, so true is the author's feeling. Yes, you feel it, but it's not necessarily true that you should rage, right? In fact, in social science and so on, there's the Kubler-Ross. It was quite popular when I was in graduate school about the stages, about counseling people who are approaching death in hospices and so on like that. And rage is part of the process, but not the end of the whole thing. Acceptance, right, is healthier. Now, that might not be true either, but there is no standard of judging this as true. But it is beautiful. And that's the beauty in Lear. Lear is certainly, in the word appears there. I haven't counted up the number of times, but Lear is raging, right? So let us go to Lear. Okay? There is one other, I don't know, there might be more. If any of the Rabbanim know, there is the study of Rav Zevin. Rav Zevin was a great Talmud Chacham, a massive Talmud Chacham. He was the editor of the Encyclopedia Talmudit. And he was also a very prolific writer on all kinds of topics, and he has a long essay in Or Halacha on Shylock, in other words, the Merchant of Venice, and the Halacha. Right? So he wrote this long essay on the halachic issues in the Merchant of Venice. But that's from a halachic perspective. Has anybody else written on, anybody know? On any other plays of Shakespeare? Okay. So Lear is a very long play with a lot of wonderful, terrific kind of subplots that play counterpoint in a kind of a musical form to what is going on in the main text of Lear, in the main story of Lear. Okay? Lear is a very, very old person. He's 80 years old. He's the king. 80 at that time, when Shakespeare first wrote the play in the early 1600s, was it's like 110 today. Okay? But he's been king, and he decides, okay, he's going to give his kingdom away to his 3 daughters. Okay? He's going to divide them, the kingdom, based on a test of something, whether they're worthy of becoming the government and their husbands becoming he's going to retain the title king. He is going to retain 100 knights who will constantly be with him, but the kingdom will be ceded to his among his daughters, and they will get based on how much they love him. They have to offer their obeisances of love. The daughters Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia, right? And this test will determine what. So we will now, right? I'll read a little bit from Lear at the beginning, as the test begins. Know that we have divided our kingdom in three, our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we, unburdened, crawl toward death. Tell me, my daughters, right. Tell me.
Okay, I'm all three daughters.
All three daughters. In Shakespearean times, the daughters were guys. There were no women in the play, right? Tell me, my daughters, since now we will divest us both of a rule, interest of territory, cares of state, which of you shall we say doth love us most? That we our largest bounty may extend, where nature doth with merit challenge. Goneril, our eldest born, speak first.
Sir, I love you more than word can wield the matter, dearer than eyesight, space, and liberty, beyond what can be valued, rich or rare, no less than life, with grace, health, beauty, honor, as much as child ever loved or father found, a love that makes breath poor and speech unable, beyond all matter of so much I love you.
And Lear says, fine, wonderful. This is what you're going to get. And he draws on a map, right? The next daughter. Our dearest Regan, wife of Cornwall.
I am made of that self-metal as my sister, and prize me at her worth. In my true heart, I find she names my very deed of love. Only she comes too short, that I profess myself an enemy to all other joys, which the most precious square of sense possesses, and find I am alone felicitate in your dear highness's love.
Commentary. Notice Regan. Regan is really a schlechter. They're all bad. Both of the Goneril is also a schlechter. She's bad. I don't want to use the English word for it, but a schlechter. She's not. She is the exact opposite of Hannah Spinzer. Okay. What Regan is trying to one up her sister. She says, "Yeah, everything my sister said is true, but not only that, right? She comes too short, right? Because I'm an enemy of any other joy in life except
My father.
right? So she's one upped her sister right now. Lear's favorite child, his youngest child, is Cordelia, who is engaged to who will be engaged either to to the Duke of Burgundy or to the King of France. Okay. And so Lear now turns to his third daughter, Cordelia. Now our joy, although our last and least, to whose young love the vines of France and milk of Burgundy strive to be of interest. What can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sisters? Speak.
Nothing, my lord.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing will come of nothing. Speak again.
Unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more nor less.
How, Cordelia, mend your speech a little, lest you may mar your fortunes.
Good my lord, you have begot me, bred me, loved me. I return these duties back as a right fit. Obey you, love you, and most honor you. Why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all? Haply, when I shall wed, that lord whose hand must take my plight shall carry half my love with him, half my care and duty. Sure, I shall never marry like my sisters, to love my father all.
But goes thy heart with this?
Aye, my lord.
So young and so untender?
So young, my lord, and true.
True? Let it be so. Thy truth then be thy dower. For by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate, and the night, by all the operation of the orbs for whom we do exist and cease to be, here I disclaim all my paternal care, propinquity and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart and me, hold thee from this forever. The barbarous Scythian, or he that makes his generation messes to gorge his appetite, shall to my bosom be as well neighbored, pitied and relieved, as though my sometime daughter. Lear has a faithful servant, Kent, who interrupts and says, "Good my liege!" And Lear turns back to him and says, "Peace, Kent! Come not between the dragon and his wrath. I loved her most and thought to set my rest on her kind nursery. Hence, and avoid my sight." So Lear has basically banished Cordelia and Kent. And the play goes on. Lear thinks he's made the deal. He finds out in the course of the play, and we're not getting into the subplots. Subplots are wonderful, but I'm focusing only on Lear. I know it's not fair to Shakespeare, but we're conditioned by time. Lear finds out that both daughters are perfidious. His downfall begins. Lear experiences his creatureliness, his frailty, his tragedy. At the end of the play, Lear, who has survived a terrible storm, but barely survived, who has been reduced from rage to rags. Cordelia, at the very end of the play, Cordelia, having married the King of France, is captured in a battle and reunited with Lear at the end, and then dies, is hung. In the course of this, Lear is beset at one point by both daughters, by Goneril and Reagan, who say, basically you're a cantankerous, impossible old man, okay? One might say it's time to grow up, okay? We're not going to put up with your 100 nights, and it goes. It's almost like it echoes in a way the biblical passages of Avram arguing with God about if they're 50 tzaddikim, if they're 40 tzaddikim. Not 100 nights, not 100 nights, 50 nights. No, not 50 nights, 25. Well, who needs 20? Who needs 10? Who needs 5? And finally, Regan, as the daughters are piling it on, finally adds, who needs 1? What do you need any nights? And Lear says, sometimes you wonder if Lear knows that he's speaking famous lines, right? But this is really unpleasant. Lear says, "Here, nature, here, dear goddess, here, suspend thy purpose if thou didst intend to make this creature fruitful." His daughter. "Inter womb convey sterility, dry up in her the organs of increase, and from her derogate body never spring a babe to honor her. If she must teen, create her child of spleen, that it may live and be athwart disnatured torment to her. Let it stamp wrinkles in her brow of youth, with cadent tears fret channels in her cheeks, turn all her mother's pains and benefits to laughter and contempt, that she may feel how sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child. How sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child." Ingratitude, no thanks, how sharper than a serpent's tooth. Now I know serpents don't have teeth, right? In Shakespearean English, tooth means a bite, okay? How sharper than to have a thankless child, to suffer ingratitude, right? Do you have to love your parents? You don't. So all you guys said no. You might not know, K-N-O-W, but you're mechavein to something that I tell all people who are going to become psychologists or psychiatrists, happen to have been students of mine. I always told them, have a needle point or a sign on your wall. Okay, for those patients who are capable of reading Hebrew, quoted from the Maharal in Nesivos Olam, one of Maharal's many Surim, who makes the point that the Torah does not require us to love our parents, right? But it does require them to honor them. And there's a difference between love and honoring. Now, it's a very good thing. If you actually love your parents, you are blessed. Right? You're blessed. If your children love you, you should feel that you've done could I use the word? A darn. Okay, I'll use the word. I was not allowed to use any other word. Even darn originally when I was a little kid, I wasn't allowed to say the word. A darn good job. Right? But if you learn the Rambam in Hilchot Deot, you will learn that in fact, the guy sitting next to you, do you have to love that guy? What do you say? No? What doesn't the pasuk say you have to love? It says, "V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha." right? But learn the Rambam, and you'll see very carefully, you'll see the Rambam does not say that you actually have to love. There's only one other person that you have to love. A ger. Okay? Learn the Rambam in Hilchos Deos, right? But that would take us off onto a long, long journey into the Rambam. A wonderful thing to know, right? You have to act with kavod to parents. You have to act with kavod to others, to the guy sitting next to you, right? On the other hand, okay, what about gratitude? Do I have to, let's say I do something good for a person, right? Okay? Do they have to express gratitude? You can have an opinion, but I'm going to tell you, okay, I want to put some halachic framework on this. Again, you have to, right? Because that's part of the as if, right? Now, let's say you did somebody a favor, and he doesn't express gratitude. He comes to you a second time, okay? And he asks you for a favor. Do you have to do this favor for him the second time? Yes, you're saying yes. Is that I know what these things are. I have grandchildren. Right? So, okay. So the Maharal says in Gur Aryeh, the pasuk, Hakadosh Baruch Hu did not bring rain upon the earth, right? Because Adam Ayin lavodas hadama. There's no man. Man hasn't yet been created. So the Chazal explained Rashi that there is no man yet to express and to recognize the chastei hamakom, the loving kindness of God in bringing rain and sustenance. The Maharal draws from that the following conclusion, that a person who does it, you don't have to do tova to somebody in the same way if you lend people money and they don't pay you back, you don't have to lend them again. There's an obligation, right? And you don't have to do the tova if a person doesn't express gratitude. Expressing gratitude, gentlemen, expressing gratitude is an extremely difficult problem. Why? Here I like to quote the story of the Chassam Sofer. He's talking to his son, the Chassam Sofer, and he says, I have this congregant, this balabas, who's making my life miserable, right? And the Chassam Sofer, his son, says to him, why? Chassam Sofer says, I don't know why. I never did him a favor. Ingrate. But I never did him a favor. So why should he be angry with me? The way when we should express gratitude and we don't, we often throw a stone. It was said once by a Jewish wit that you can judge the size of the favor you did to somebody by the size of the stone he throws at you. Small favor, small stone. Big favor, big stone. Why? Because people who are become dependent, who need another person, in the song are the luckiest people in the world. But in life, we don't want to feel that I did it, right? When did you say this issue today? When did you said it today? This very idea. You all said Kriya Shema today, right? Right? So you'll come in Eretz Yisrael, and what will be? Yachalta, right? And then what will happen? And another place in Dvarim, in the same chapter, it is, you will, certainly, not blessed, you will. That's what's going to happen. When people like to say, I did it, they don't want to be dependent. You will say, the Torah says, I'm acting it out, this wealth that I have, Kochi, the Otzem Yodi, Asuliyat HaChayil Hazeh, made me this wealth. Right? And Tosos in Avodah Zarah on Daf Hey says people are kfui tov. Who was the first ingrate in the Torah, by the way? My wife said Adam. Why?
Well, he said the woman that you gave me was the reason I.
Right, he blamed it Shelley. Right, he blamed it on the woman. I didn't, and like Chazal said, like Rashi says, I didn't ask for her. He's kan kafa betova. Look at the Rashi, kan kafa betova, right? Tosa and Avodah Zarah explains the reason. The problem here is that we don't want to owe a person something. We don't owe. We feel beholden. We don't like that feeling. So we're kfuito, we become ingrates. Okay? Now, this idea, by the way, in Pachad Yitzchak and Chanukah, I think it's the second mamar. Anybody? No? Okay, I'm looking to the people in the box seats. Okay, I think it's in the second mamar, but it's in one of the first mamar in Pachad. He says, when you say modim, translate the word modim anachnu loch. Thanks, okay? So it's about thanks, right? When we say modim, there's modim al. I give thanks for something. But they also modim she. In Hebrew, the difference is as follows. When you say modeh she, I am modeh she, it implies obligation. And we don't like to be obligated. We don't like to be obligated. We resent obligation. Lear is a person who people bowed down to him in his whole life. 80 years people have been bowing down to him. He expects everything to be with gratitude. Everything, and gratitude has to be total, right? Lear, on the other hand, by virtue of that, is not a grateful person, right? Lear suffers outrageous fortune. Lear suffers a storm in which he is pushed down to the ground. He experiences abandonment. He experiences rejection. Oh, reason, not the need. Our basest beggars are in the poorest things superfluous. Allow not nature more than nature needs. Man's life is as cheap as beast. And he's speaking to his daughter Regan. Thou art a lady. If only to go warm and gorgeous were gorgeous. Why, nature needs not what thou gorgeous wearest. Don't need all those fine clothing. But for true need, you heavens, give me that patience. Patience I need. You see me here, you gods, a poor old man, as full of grief as age, wretched in both. If it be you that stirs these daughters' hearts against their father, fool me not so much to bear it tamely. Touch me with noble anger, and let not woman's weapons water drops stain my man's cheeks. No, no, you unnatural hags! I will have such revenges on you both that all the world shall. I will do such things that all the world shall what they are. Yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of earth. You think I'll weep? Never. Raging. And from this, Lear moves on to madness. From madness, anger, to madness. He's beginning to go mad. We don't have time for me to read those texts, but he's beginning, and he knows he's going mad. Today they call it dementia, but he knows he's going mad. He knows he's losing it. He's not the king. He's not treated as the king. He's not the father. He's not treated as the father. It's all of life is falling apart. This person who had been the perfect tyrant, right? It's falling apart. Auden, W.H. Auden, it's not on the poems that I wrote. W.H. Auden wrote a 6-line poem in 1939. He had been in Nazi Germany. He was still living in England at the time before he hightailed it to the west side of Manhattan. And it's called Epitaph on a Tyrant. Of course, Hitler had not died. Epitaph on a Tyrant. Perfection of a kind was what he was after. And the poetry he invented was easy to understand. He knew human folly like the back of his hand and was greatly interested in armies and fleets. When he laughed, respectable senators burst with laughter. And when he cried, the little children died in the streets. Again, I don't want to be too political, but somewhat political. When he laughed, respectable senators burst with laughter. And when he cried, the little children died in the streets. That's who Lear is, and he's found out that it doesn't work. And that, if you will, is the tragic ending of Lear, brought along with at the end, he is reunited with his daughter Cordelia, and they have a true reconciliation of truth, and yet she dies. So we might say of Lear that it is a tragedy for him because he never gets it. And the tragedy would be best summed, if I had to use another poem by another Englishman, Shelley, Ozymandias. Ozymandias is this tremendous, the British were very good at robbing all the archaeological treasures of the British Empire and shipping it back to the British Museum, which is you go to for nothing. Don't forget that. Okay? Worth going to. And particularly looking at the statues of Ramses. He might have been right? And Ozymandias might have been Ramses. But look at two things in the British Museum. Look at the statue of Ramses, stand before it and see the way people looked at Paro, right? And stand in front of the busts of Hadrian and stick your tongue out at him. Ozymandias, I met a traveler from an ancient land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survived, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Unfortunately, in the British Museum, you won't see the land. That's what Lear is. He's shouting into nothingness. He has been reduced to nothing. But he didn't get it. And the tragedy is he gave up everything from this one fault line of the character. Watch out, gentlemen. Watch out for applause. Watch out. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be valued. Watch out in life for a need, a consuming need. There is this frightening story at the beginning of the Gulag, Solzhenitsyn. A party functionary comes from central headquarters in Moscow to a certain factory and gives some speech, and all the workers stand up. You keep clapping. You can't stop, by the way. You can't stop clapping. Finally, the foreman of the workers in this factory, he stops clapping. And everybody stops clapping right away. The foreman winds up in the Gulag in Stalin's concentration camps. Watch out. It is heady stuff, but it's dangerous. That's Lear, the tragedy, the tragic ending. And it's called a tragedy. However, there are some, and I think a close reading lends a lot of credence to this. And it's based on a few things, but the main thing, where did I throw Lear? This is the only prop I had to throw. I mean, I could have thrown the cell phone, but Lear, just before he dies, well, his daughter has died. Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all? Thou come no more, never, 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 never. Pray you, undo this button. Thank you, sir. Do you see this? Look at her. And the kasha is, in the middle of this farewell speech of his daughter has just died. Pray you, sir, undo this button. Thank you, sir. William, Bill, I'm on familiar terms with Shakespeare. Bill, what is this line doing here? Lear needs a button undone. He can't do it himself. He's old and infirm. Pray you. Pray, what does pray mean? Please, 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 pray you, sir. Sir? Undo this button, and he undoes it. Thank you. In the end, this line, which, if I were arguing this to either Professor Talbis or to the Rav, this line, like there's not an what I say about Sfas Emes. There is no extra line in the Sfas Emes. No such thing, right? There's no extra line in Tosfos and Rashi. It's there for a reason, right? You have to touch that. That's a Yiddish. You have to get that. You have to get that reason. Lear in the end has learned something. At what price? At what price? But he's learned something. And the question of all of this, in terms of Torah U'Madda, is this Shabbos, when you say Nishmat Kol Chai, a long poem, Mordechai Dubin, a person whose name you haven't heard of, but one of the unsung, really heroic people living in the terror of communism. On Shabbos, Mordechai Dubin spent 45 minutes, remember? 45 minutes saying Nishmat. Why? How could you spend saying, most people think Nishmat is a long thing so that you can come and still be on time for Baruch Hu. It's just a poem, even if you have to read it in English. Right? It's just incredible, beautiful. Nishmat Kol Chai. There is much more to be said. There is much more to be said. Gentlemen, you have to get up in the morning. Yidgaber Kari, the first halach in Shulchan Aruch is you have to get up in the morning. To get up in the morning is to accomplish what Lear, if he was able to accomplish it, was only able to accomplish it at the end of his life. To conquer himself. He ruled over everything, but he couldn't rule over himself. He needed that adulation, and he didn't know how to give honor to the other. Dovid HaMelech, right, got up at midnight to sing poems that he composed, right? Ura Hanevel, the Gemara says in Brachos, Ura Kavodi, and we are told, Shulchan Aruch, Yidgaber Kari, La'amod, La'avodat Boreh, a person, the first law in Shulchan Aruch is you have to conquer yourself. You have to rise above yourself. We are born as screaming, grasping, wanting, self-centered, selfish, narcissistic people, babies. Can we grow up? Yitgaber Kari, it takes the strength of self-strength. La'amod la'avodat barosh sheyehehu me'orer hashachar. That we to stir up the dawn. Gratitude. A poem finally by another expat, Denise Levertov, British expat. An awe so quiet, I don't know when it began. A gratitude had begun to sing in me. Was there some moment dividing song from no song? When does dewfall begin? When does night fold its arms over our hearts to cherish them? When is daybreak?